Hi, this is Paul. I just wanted to drop a quick video if anyone's interested in how to replace the shaft bearings and seals on a Bobcat 873. How do you know if your bearings need replacement? A telltale sign, of course, is oil on the inside of the rim as well as oil spotting on the ground. What you see here is the tube on the rear wheel assembly and the seal and bearings still in the Bobcat. We're going to show how to pull that out in a minute with some special tools that I've made, and I can describe what each one of those do. But first of all, the necessary materials. Here you see the Timken bearing part numbers. The bearing itself is an LM104949 and the race is an LM104911. And of course an SKS. I bought a double lip seal, which was actually half the price of a single lip seal, which is an SKF 24898. Now, one of the things about the hub and shaft assembly is before reassembly you want to make sure, of course, that your bearing surfaces or seal surfaces are clean. This particular Bobcat had a speedy sleeve installed, which is basically a sleeve which kind of replaces the seal surfaces. I'm not a huge fan of those. And then of course you can tell when the bearings has a real dry and raspy sound to them. Your bearing should be smooth. Obviously this has dirt and contaminants and other debris in the bearing. So how do you replace the bearings? Well, as you probably may know, down the center of the Bobcat is what's called the chain case. The chain case typically has Bobcat hydrostatic fluid in it, and if you can see in there, there's two sprockets which are directly driven from the hydraulic motors between the wheels. So the hydraulic motors extend down in the middle of the chain case. That, of course, is the rear sprockets. The front sprockets are under this cover between your front feet. If you're going to attempt this, I would suggest doing this one. It's easier. This one's a little more involved because you reach back and you have to pull out the steering levers and things to access that panel. So what I want to show now is basically prying out the bearing and seal and then using a slide hammer tool to remove the actual bearing from the tube. So let's see how this goes here. Pry out the bearing and seal. Take this and pop that out, and there's the bearing right there. Now you can see on the seal there's a little bit of a ledge here that you can grip with a puller. So I've created a slide hammer puller. It's basically something that will catch that little bit of a lip that's on the outer race. And I'm just going to put it in here. Hopefully this will go reasonably smooth, and you just walk it out. Now, you want to make sure that you sand and clean this prior to pressing in your new race. Most good mechanics will tell you that you never strike a bearing surface. I do have a soft copper hammer here, and I'll gently walk that in. Another thing I did is I tried torching these out before, but you always end up doing a little damage to the socket. So what I did is, one of the races that I torched out, I compressed it slightly, shrinking the OD, and re-welded it, and I use this as a bearing insertion tool, which allows me to strike that and get that fully seated on the tube. Now for the inner race, the inboard outer race, I've created this bar, which is slightly longer than the tube, and you have to kind of just feel your way through this and walk your bearing out. But you just gradually, it looks like I'm striking this hard, but I'm really not. I go in to where I feel it touch the bearing. It dropped in, and I'm just going to gently tap this a little on the bottom, rotate the tool, and I'm going to go 180 degrees, and then I'm going to tap it again. And I basically repeat that, and you can feel that bearing walking out. Two things I wanted to mention about this shaft assembly. Of course, the outer races that are pressed into the tube have a fixed dimension. Once you press these into the bottom of the tube, it's a fixed distance between this one and the one on the inboard side. So what happens is they've carefully figured out the distance, and basically when you put your bearings in there and then put your sprocket on the end of this spline shaft and put this bolt assembly on there, it all tightens up to where there's no left and right in play in the shaft, and yet it turns freely, so the bearings have the proper clearance. However, over time, you'll notice that because of the constant in-play in the wheel action, it causes a slight hammering of this washer. And it's hard to see here, but there's actually about 100 thousandths wear on that washer. That will affect your bearing. It'll cause the whole shaft to be sloppy in the bearing seat. So the simple fix for that is just flip the washer over. What that does is give you a nice flat surface again, puts up against the end of the shaft here, everything tightens down to the proper specification and bearing clearance, so there's none of this in-play action going on. The other thing I like to do, now of course Bobcat refills the chain case with hydrostatic fluid, or what they call their hydraulic oil, which is an expensive 5-gallon bucket of oil. I've been using AW2 in my hydraulic, 32 in my hydraulic system. However, when I change my hydraulics fluid, typically I just dump the semi-clean fluid into the chain case as a means of replenishing the chain case oil. That is important to do, or change your chain case oil, because I found that you can often get water in the chain case. If you get water in the chain case, one easy way to relieve that, of course, under the engine of the Bobcat, there's a 3-bolt cover. You remove that cover, and then on that side right there, there is a drain, and oil will settle to the bottom of the chain case. You can just release that drain until your water comes out, and then replenish it to the proper fluid level. The other quick thing I wanted to mention, it's well worth doing, is I treat this hub assembly like a standard wheel bearing hub. In other words, the outboard bearing I'm packing with grease, and that serves a couple of purposes. I'll have a new seal which will keep the oil in, plus it'll be grease packed, which will also help restrict the oil. Plus, Bobcat relies on the oil passing through this bearing, and when your Bobcat tilts, to go all the way to the end to lubricate the outboard bearing. Personally, I'm not a fan of that. That's why I pack this like you would any other wheel bearing with grease. I strongly recommend acquiring one of these grease packing tools. It packs it better than you could ever do it. You just pump the grease in till it comes out and you're done, and assemble it. I also packed the new seal with grease. All that is, I think, just a proactive way to prevent outboard bearing wear.